Nicole came home at 2:15, perfectly on schedule. She dropped 2 grocery bags on the counter, asked if I wanted anything for lunch, and disappeared upstairs. I heard her moving around in the master bedroom. Then I heard the distinct quiet of someone speaking very softly on a phone. At 2:30, I picked up my car keys and said I was heading out to get the kids. Nicole called from upstairs that she would have dinner started by 5. I said that sounded wonderful. Emma ran to me in the pickup line the way she always did, full speed, backpack bouncing. Tyler was right behind her with something he had made in art class that he needed me to examine. Immediately, and with full seriousness. I examined it with full seriousness. I told him it was extraordinary, which it was. I buckled them in and drove away from the school, keeping my voice perfectly even the entire ride home. I asked the right questions about their day. I listened to Tyler describe an injustice at the lunch table involving whose turn it had been to use the good red tray. Emma was quiet for part of the drive, looking out the window. Then at one point she asked, "Grandpa, do you think secrets are always bad?" I kept both hands on the wheel. "I think it depends on the secret, sweetheart. Good secrets are things like birthday presents. The other kind of secrets are the ones that make you feel worried or scared inside. Do you have a secret that makes you feel that way?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe," she said. Then she said nothing else. And I did not push her. We were almost home. And more than anything, I needed her to feel safe, not interrogated. Ray arrived at 5:22. He parked his truck 3 houses down and walked over through the side yard, coming in through the back gate I had left unlocked for him. I met him at the back door. He was a big man, Ray, with a white beard. He had grown in retirement, and the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades seeing the worst of things and learning how to remain composed in the middle of it. He shook my hand and stepped inside without a word. Nicole was at the stove stirring something. She turned when she heard us, and the expression that crossed her face was not quite surprise, but something faster and harder to name. Still, she recovered in about a second and said hello to Ray and asked if he was staying for dinner. "Just a quick visit," Ray said pleasantly. I was in the area. He sat at the kitchen table. I poured us both coffee. We talked about nothing. My son's trip, the weather, the Little League fields on Route 9 that the county was apparently going to resurface. Nicole finished at the stove and said she was going to help the children with their homework. She took her phone from the counter and went down the hall. Ray leaned across the table toward me and spoke very quietly. "I made some calls this afternoon," he said. The name Marcus Teal came up. He has been on the radar of the county's Special Victims Unit for about 8 months. He runs what they believe is a distribution network. He stopped, then continued in an even lower voice. He approaches people with financial vulnerabilities and uses them as access points. He looked at me. "Access to children." I set down my coffee cup. "The unit has been building a case," Ray continued, "but they have been missing a direct connection to a local household. They believe Nicole was approached approximately 4 months ago. She has significant gambling debts, close to $40,000, from an online platform. Teal's people paid off a portion of that debt in exchange for what they called cooperation." He looked at me directly. "They do not believe she understood the full scope of what she was agreeing to at the beginning, but she understands it now. And she has not gone to the police." "What does cooperation mean?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. "Access to the house, information about the family's schedule, and, potentially..." He stopped again. "They believe the 14th was going to be a move date." I looked down at the table. "The detective I spoke with wants to move tonight," Ray said. "They have been waiting for a direct household connection, and this is it. But they need the children out of the house before they come in." "How?" Ray held my gaze. "You are going to take them to my house. You are going to tell Nicole you are taking them for ice cream and a sleepover with my grandkids, which she has no reason to question because you have done it before." We had done it before. 3 months earlier, on a Saturday evening, when Ray's grandchildren were visiting from Roanoke. "She will let them go," I said. "If she does not, we move to a different plan," Ray replied. "But I think she will. She has no reason to think you know anything." I went to find Emma and Tyler. They were at the kitchen table with Nicole. Emma was working through a math worksheet. Tyler was drawing something elaborate on the back of a paper bag. I crouched down to their level and told them that Uncle Ray was outside and had just found out his grandkids were visiting, and he wanted to know if they would like to come for a sleepover. Tyler's pen was down before I finished the sentence. Emma looked at Nicole. "Can we, Mom?" Nicole looked at me. There was something in her eyes that I have thought about many times since. Something that looked almost like relief. I wonder now whether some part of her knew, whether some part of her was grateful for a reason to get them out. "Of course," she said. "Let me get their overnight bags. We have got everything they need at the house," Ray called from the doorway. Nicole looked at him. Then she nodded. She hugged Emma for slightly longer than usual, and when Tyler ran to hug her goodbye, she held him around the shoulders and pressed her face into the top of his head for just a moment, her eyes closed. I took my grandchildren out the back door, across the side yard, and into Ray's truck. I buckled them in. I looked back at the house once. Then I got in, and Ray drove us away. I will not pretend I felt certain in those moments. I will not pretend there was not a voice somewhere underneath everything asking whether I had gotten this terribly wrong. Whether Nicole would be confused and hurt when we left like that. Whether this was all some catastrophic misunderstanding, and I would spend the rest of my life explaining myself to my son. But I thought about what Emma had asked me in the car. "Do you think secrets are always bad?" And I thought about the folded piece of paper in the back of the leather portfolio that said, "You know what happens." So I drove away. Ray's wife, Martha, had the guest room ready and the children's favorite cereal on the counter and a movie already queued up on the television. She was that kind of woman. I sat in Ray's living room and watched the clock. I waited. At 7:48 that evening, Ray's phone rang. He answered it, listened for about 45 seconds, and then looked at me. "They have him," he said. Marcus Teal was 3 blocks from the house at the time of the arrest. He had driven up from Richmond. Then he paused. "They have Nicole in custody as well." I sat with that for a moment. "The children," I said, "they are safe. They are right here." He nodded toward the hallway, where I could hear Tyler loudly narrating the movie to Martha, who was responding with what sounded like genuine enthusiasm. "They are perfectly safe." I put my face in my hands. I was not a man who cried easily. I had prided myself on that for most of my adult life, and I am no longer certain it was ever something worth being proud of. But that night, in Ray's living room, on the 9th of October, I let myself be overwhelmed for exactly 1 minute. Then I straightened up and called my son. Daniel answered on the second ring. He was in his hotel room in Phoenix. It was almost 9 o'clock his time. I told him everything. I did not soften it. I did not search for a gentler way to say what had happened. I told him what Mrs. Patterson had said. I told him what I had found. I told him what Ray had discovered. I told him what the police had done. And most important of all, I told him that his children were safe. That they were at Ray's house eating cereal and watching a movie about a dog who could skateboard. The line was very quiet for a long time. Then finally, he said one word. "Dad." And his voice broke on that single syllable. "Get on the first flight home," I said. "I will be here when you land." He was home by noon the next day. The weeks that followed were not simple. There is no honest version of this story where the weeks that followed were simple. Daniel took an emergency leave from work. There were interviews with detectives, meetings with a victim's advocate, and long conversations with a child psychologist who specialized in helping children process frightening things in ways that were appropriate for their age. Emma had more questions than Tyler, as she always had. Tyler, for his part, seemed mostly concerned with whether the policeman had been nice to his mother when they took her away. And when we told him they had treated her with respect, that answer seemed to settle something inside him. Nicole had, just as Ray described, accumulated gambling debts that she had hidden completely from Daniel. She had been approached 6 months earlier by someone connected to Marcus Teal's network. Someone who framed the arrangement in terms vague enough that she could lie to herself about what it was, at least in the beginning. But only in the beginning. Because sooner or later, every lie reaches a point where it can no longer hide behind confusion. And by then she knew. The investigators confirmed that Nicole had not directly harmed her children. But she had opened a door. She had allowed something into that house that had no business being anywhere near them. That truth did not need embellishment. It was heavy enough on its own. At trial, Marcus Teal received 32 years. He had prior convictions in 2 other states, and the prosecution presented evidence connecting him to 4 other households over a period of 7 years. The detective who led the investigation told me after the verdict that the arrest tied to our house, or more precisely, the phone records and financial transfers that arrest unlocked, had provided the thread that unraveled the entire network. Nicole pleaded guilty to charges of child endangerment and conspiracy. She received 8 years, with the possibility of parole after 5. I will not tell you exactly how I feel about that sentence, because even now I do not fully know. I still sit with it. Some days it feels nowhere near enough. Other days I remember the way she pressed her face into Tyler's hair and closed her eyes before we left that night. And I am forced to confront a truth I do not particularly like, which is that human beings are capable of carrying contradictions too large to resolve cleanly. Daniel moved closer to my apartment 6 months later. He bought a house 2 streets over from Ray. The children started at a new school and made new friends. And the dog they adopted in January has taken a particular liking to Emma and follows her everywhere. Tyler has started asking me to teach him chess, which I have done with great enthusiasm and, I will admit, questionable patience. I think often about that Tuesday morning in October. I think about a school counselor who chose to stop a grandfather in a parking lot rather than let something go unaddressed. I think about how easy it would have been for her to tell herself it was not her place, that there was probably an innocent explanation, that she did not have all the information and should not interfere in a family's private life. But she did interfere. She chose courage over comfort. She trusted her instincts, and because she did, 2 children came home safe. I am not a man given to sweeping statements about providence or destiny or the way unseen hands arrange the lives of ordinary people. My wife was the one with deep faith. She would have known exactly what to say about all of this. Sometimes, when my own certainty falls short, I find myself borrowing hers. What I can say is this. I dropped my grandchildren at school on a Tuesday morning, and a woman I had never met stopped me in a parking lot and told me the truth. Everything that followed, every decision, every warning, every phone call, every quiet act of courage, passed through an opening no wider than a few carefully spoken words. Emma still holds my hand when we walk somewhere together. Tyler still insists that I examine everything he makes with what he calls my expert grandfather opinion, and I provide it without hesitation. The maple tree in Daniel's new backyard does not have a tire swing yet, but it will before summer. I have already bought the rope. I am 64 years old. I have buried a wife. I have raised a son. And I have stood in a quiet kitchen holding a folded piece of paper while the world reconfigured itself around me. I have learned that the most important things are rarely announced in advance. They come on ordinary mornings while the leaves are turning, while your granddaughter is telling you something very important about the correct way to draw a horse, while you still believe the day ahead will be simple. Pay attention, stay steady. And if someone tells you something that feels important, even a stranger, even in a parking lot, even when part of you desperately wants to believe there must be an innocent explanation, listen. Sometimes the people who protect your family most fiercely are the ones you have not met yet. And sometimes all it takes is one honest person willing to speak to change everything. If this story stayed with you, stay with us for more. Because sometimes the truth arrives quietly, but its impact lasts forever.